the next presenter, Dr. Jojin V. John, who is presenting another problematic area, the Japan's relations with China, especially with regard to the BRI. Thank you. Please, Jojin.
Thank you, Chair. And am I audible?
Yeah.
Yeah, sure. Thank you. Thank you, Chair, for the introduction. At the outset, I would like to thank the organizers, especially Professor Josukutty, for giving this opportunity and organizing this very important conference. The topic of my presentation is Japan's approach to the Belt and Road Initiative. As the previous speakers have mentioned, the rise of China is the most important issue of the 21st century, and it actually get the headlines, not only get the headlines, but also occupies the mind space of the foreign policy decision makers and thinkers across the world. So in that sense, BRI occupies a significant space in that rise of China. Since its announcement in 2003, BRI have gained significant attention. At one level, BRI is an ambitious plan to develop infrastructure investment plan to develop a new trade routes connecting China with the rest of the world. While infrastructure investment is a part of economic activity, the provision of funds has significant strategic implications as it is used for political leverage. The political aspect became very particularly salient as China increases geoeconomic presence through the provision of the infrastructure investment under its grand diplomatic vision of the Belt and Road Initiative. So in that sense, BRI is far more than an infrastructure investment project. It is an effort to develop, expand in the dependent markets for China and grow China's economic and political power, and increase its create the right conditions for China's return to the world center stage. Though it has been around for the last 8 years, information about the various infrastructure projects is vague, and it has gone through a series of evolution, particularly, I mean, it started as the One Belt, One Road Initiative. So it went through a lot of it went through evolution. So according to the official data, the China had invested roughly $140 billion by 2020 in the BRI projects. Well, it's also, while it is one of the flagship points initiative of President Xi Jinping in its rise to power. The attention within China for BRI has also been reduced in the last few years. Particularly investment in China's the BRI has been fallen by 50% since 2019, and Beijing has no longer doling out hard cash. Given the fact that Japan has been traditionally the most active infrastructure investment power particularly in Asia, BRI has a significant implication for in Japan and its foreign policy, given and also with respect to geographical proximity and the historical implications of BRI for Japan has been profound. In a narrow sense, the BRI as an infrastructure investment strategy, it challenges Japan, given that it was an established and the leading infrastructure investor in Asia for quite some time. In a broader sense, the BRI as a geopolitical strategy, geoeconomic strategy and geopolitical strategy, it attempts to revise the existing international order in which Japan has much at stake. The evolution of Japan's approach to BRI also needs to be understood in the broader context of Japan's relationship with Japan-China relations and its foreign policy approach in the broader regional context. If one were to look at Japan's official discourse on BRI, well, since the announcement to it took some time, and Japan's official discourse on BRI has been slow and very cautious, primarily because Japan was not a part of the BRI project. It's not directly involved in the project. And unlike the Asian Infrastructure Development Bank, which Japan refused to become a member, it adopted a wait-and-see approach to the Belt and Road Initiative. Well, it's also created a lot of interesting discourse within Japan. While the strategic community in Japan has been skeptical about BRI, the business community has been showing key interest in views of potential economic opportunity, particularly the Japanese business associations like Kaidaran has been vocal about their interest in engaging with the BRI projects. So, and also you see the different kinds of approach within the Japanese establishment, particularly between the MITI, the Economic Ministry, and the Foreign Policy, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. Well, it's a little difficult to theorize Japan's response to BRI, but well, there is a way. One thing, if there is a way to, if there is, I mean, it can be characterized as a complex heading strategy, or Japan's response has been a complex hedging response, which involves a sort of a conditional engagement and also a balancing approach to the Belt and Road Initiative, which is balancing in unilateral, bilateral, and multilateral level. Let me dwell a little bit on these aspects of Japan's response to Belt and Road Initiative. As far as the conditional engagement is concerned, the first BRI forum in 2017 was the first instance in where Japan showed a keen interest or shown an interest in engaging with Belt and Road Initiative. And it's also important to remember that this is the time that Japan was trying to improve its relationship with China and warming up its relationship with China after a difficult time since the early 2010 because of the territorial disputes in the East China Sea. And the then Prime Minister Shinzo Abe has indicated Japan's interest for conditional engagement with Belt and Road Initiative by describing the effort as a win-win situation. The Japanese Prime Minister stressed on the importance of international standard to ensure that the infrastructure projects are open, transparent, and economic viability, and should also account for financial health and recipient. So Japan sent a high-powered delegation to the first Belt and Road Initiative in 2017, led by then the second, the number 2 of the leading Liberal Democratic Party, Toshiharu Nikai. And in 2018, during the summit between President Xi and the Prime Minister Abe, during Prime Minister Abe's visit to China, the two countries agreed to collaborate developmental and infrastructure projects in third countries. The two countries signed a memorandum of understanding for cooperation on 50 projects. A smart city project in Thailand has been the most important one in this particular cooperation agreement. They also established a bilateral platform or a forum on third-country cooperation. Though the pact signed did not mention the Belt and Road Initiative, but however, some of these projects that were under the preview of BRI, the Belt and Road Initiative has also prompted Japan to revisit not only its own infrastructure investment policy and initiatives, but also its aid policy and the broader foreign policy approach. Japan has for decades engaged in development of infrastructure and connectivity in Asia by supporting and building roads and ports and other infrastructure facilities through a combination of private investments and official developmental assistance. So in response to BRI, Japan in 2015 announced the Partnership for Quality Infrastructure with an investment of about 110 billion US dollars. And its main aim was the expansion and acceleration of the assistance through Japan's International Cooperation Agency in collaboration with ADB, and it took measures to increase the supply of funding through Japan's Bank for International Cooperation and others. The emphasis on quality tries to differentiate Japan's proposal from the arguably cheaper and less sophisticated offers from China. In addition to the project, they also emphasized on country's development plan, an alternative to the original bilateral and asymmetrical approach of the BRI, thus making it attractive more for countries which are looking for alternatives. So in 2016, Japan extended the Partnership for Quality Infrastructure initiative from $110 billion to $200 billion. Well, and also introduce a global reach of the program, and also expanded the scope of the program beyond physical infrastructure, but also involving other organizations, and also in the fields of energy, raw materials, and beyond. And also set up the Japan Overseas Infrastructure Investment Corporation in 2017, and the Japan Infrastructure Initiative in 2017. Basically, it was actually a conglomeration of the private institutions, but the government took the lead in terms of establishing it as a channel through which Japan can fund infrastructure projects abroad. And also, in conjunction with that, in 2016, Japan announced the Free and Indo-Pacific Initiative. So in Japan's foreign policy, it seems to view FOIPs, or the free and as a political context, and PQI is an economic one. The PQI is...
Jojen, you have 2 more minutes.
Okay, the PQI
2 more minutes.
Oh, sure. It's not an adversarial towards BRI or PRC for that matter, although it's difficult for the FOIPs to shake off that image of it. Oh, well, on the bilateral and the second, while being cautiously engaging or conditionally engaging with the Belt and Road Initiative, Japan has also been balancing its approach, and this balancing approach has, I mean, on the one hand, you have the unilateral, but also it has been taken up the bilateral and unilateral channels, and particularly Japan EU, Japan India growth corridor. I mean, Japan India initiative of the Asia Africa growth corridor, the Blue Dot network, the US Japan Australia initiative, and lately the Quad has been a forum through which Japan has been pushing the agenda of multilateral, the mini-lateral infrastructure initiative. And it's also another noteworthy balancing approach that the Japanese has been taken is the multilateral use of the multilateral mechanisms to set the standard of quality infrastructure. And in doing so, it pushed a normative balancing to the Belt and Road Initiative. And this has been seen as actively since 2016 G7 summit, where Japan took, and also and lately we have seen in the G7 Japan played an active role. Well, of course, it's the US which took the lead in terms of Build Back Better World initiative, but Japan has been also an active player. So in conclusion, well, Japan will remain an important actor in shaping the Belt and Road Initiative going forward, while the Japan response so far has featured a strategy of complex hedging through unilateral, bilateral, and multilateral balancing, and the conditional engagement, together with the conditional engagement. However, well, Japan's response will subject to the context, the situations, mainly the Chinese response and the US factor, and the nature of the relationship between Japan and China. And the overall objective seems not to contain BRI, but to influence the Chinese behavior and its approach to infrastructure, finance, and development, and more broadly, in its international behavior by directly engaging China through conditional support and shaping the international context through this balancing unilaterally, bilaterally, and multilaterally. Thank you. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Georgian, for your wonderful presentation with regard to the perennial conflict between Japan and China, and see its reflection. See, although they are trying to develop a kind of win-win situation, see there are still problems. It is not a secret that the conflict between Japan and China for supremacy in this particular region, and as part of the Indo-Pacific construct itself is an idea of Shinzo Abe, and he has convinced Donald Trump for developing these kinds of things. We know all these things, and see the conflict still is there, although they are trying to patch up their conflict to some extent. And your presentation is wonderful, and thank you, Georgian, for your presentation.